Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This was in the early 2010s when smartphones were just becoming ubiquitous and cloud computing was starting to take off. Email, video calls, and instant messaging were the most common business tools. I was a young regional sales manager for a major tech company. I covered the enterprise software market in 7 Midwestern states. My division worked out of New York, and I had a home office in Chicago. I had made my reputation by consistently hitting my quota and keeping costs within budget. I would get reassigned to struggling markets, and more often than not, I would usually make my sales number. Nothing too fancy, I just figured out where the best opportunities were and concentrated on them. In those days, we had something called client engagement funds. CEF, or as we jokingly called it, creating extravagant fun. Before stricter regulations came into place, it was money we could use for almost anything you could imagine. Fancy dinners, sending clients to tech conferences, taking them on product research trips. I once took 5 executives for a weekend of wine tasting in Napa Valley. As long as you had the receipts and your boss was in the loop, except when they specifically asked not to know, we were free to spend money as we saw fit. This was Silicon Valley-style schmoozing, all tax-deductible. Typically, the CEF money was 3% of your total annual gross sales and was use it or lose it, meaning it had to be spent because it wouldn't roll over. I always had some left over. As a team player, I would let my boss, Marcus, we called him the shark behind his back, know so he could use it. No big deal. Towards the end of the year, my weekly email updates from the company started including sign-offs for payments to a tech consulting firm I had never heard of before. What was weird is they were for a UX design company that wasn't one of my regional suppliers. I called our local partner in that market and learned that they had never used the company, or even heard of them. I finally figured out that they were from Marcus and that he had thrown them in with my other sign-offs. I called him and asked if he knew what they were. Hey Marcus, I've got some strange invoices here from a UX design company. Any idea what those are about? I asked. Oh, those? They should be assigned to your CF. Don't worry about them, he replied dismissively. This was a little unusual because UX design would normally be taken out of other budgets or come down from product development. Whatever, I signed off on them. Hung out to dry. About 3 months later, I was called into HQ for a meeting where I was told I was being transferred to a market that I had never worked before and would be required to relocate. At the time, my wife was pregnant and we had just started an extensive remodel on our newly purchased condo. The company had some relocation benefits, but it was just too hectic to pull up roots and move to the West Coast. I declined the offer and was told that I could look for another job within the company or receive a severance package. I wound up taking the severance. The truth comes to light. Several months later, one of my ex-coworkers told me that my region had been taken over by one of Marcus's past work associates who he managed to get hired in my spot and that the region was tanking. Badly. Nothing made sense. Why was I terminated and then replaced by someone who lived in another city and who couldn't do the job? I started to think in my naivety that I may have put a target on my back. After some research and digging, I learned that the UX design company billing the CEF was based in Marcus's previous city and was just a virtual office, a VoIP number, and an LLC registered by the new person in my job. I later found out it was his girlfriend/mistress. I was livid. Like most people, I tend to plan revenge in my head but never really go through with it. Most of the time, it's a coping mechanism and not very useful in moving on past being wronged. But this was so egregious, so uncalled for, and so disruptive to my life that I felt I had to get even. My plan evolved to take this guy down, whatever the time it took, whatever the cost in lives or money. I was going to get this shark. I may have been able to rat him out to the company, but they might have dismissed my complaint as coming from a disgruntled ex-employee with an axe to grind. The hook. I decided that I was going to approach Marcus as a phony recruiter, not just a guy collecting resumes, but as a retained corporate headhunter, someone paid to onboard people for big jobs. I had spent a year early in my career working for a super exclusive headhunting firm and knew exactly what transpired in the process. My subterfuge required international video calls, phony websites, faked British accents, and overseas friends to do my bidding. Marcus was obsessed with luxury cars and Formula One racing. He watched every race and attended several Grand Prix events each year. He would incessantly chatter on about both subjects. To bait him, I arranged for him to be approached for an executive position with a major German luxury car manufacturer for a position tied to Formula One sponsorships and included a shopping list of benefits and perks. The job would require hobnobbing with major racing teams flying around the world, business class of course, and basically spending money. It was a job he could only dream of. The setup. In the slow and methodical long con, I strung him along until the time was right to close with an offer. The only catch was that he had to report to Germany for the final offer and onboarding. I deliberately scheduled it for the week of the old job's division meetings and reporting. They were mandatory and impossible to miss without raising red flags. Marcus was worried that his absence would be impossible to cover, especially if he was out of the country. "Listen, Marcus," I said, using my best British accent during our video call. "We can move the appointment up a few days so that you'll be able to attend your meeting, but you'll need to purchase an unrestricted business class seat and make your own hotel reservations. Save your receipts and the car company will reimburse you." Marcus showed up to his swanky hotel suite, using his own credit card for the expensive room, and promptly received an email from the car company that his appointment had to be rescheduled for the following Monday because of a major corporate crisis. Marcus called the phony recruiter in a panic about missing the corporate meetings back in the States. "Marcus, don't worry," I reassured him. "Just call in sick. Whatever happens with the old job, you're heading to much greener pastures. Enjoy your weekend in Europe. By Monday, you'll be in your dream job." The sting. While Marcus was cooling his jets in Europe, I nonchalantly called his boss, the president of the division, and casually asked for a reference on Marcus's work ethic and dates of employment. You'd be surprised how often this mistake happens. The president, to his credit, didn't tip his hand or act very surprised by the call, but like a good corporate wonk, he referred me to human resources. I let it slip that Marcus was in Europe finalizing his new job and that he'd already given the company notice. My bad. Bloody aftermath and how the Revenge overstepped its original mission. Eventually, I was able to put together the aftermath from old co-workers and other people in the industry who did not know I was the Revenge Ninja. When Monday came and went, Marcus must have been apoplectic. This is to be assumed since we had cut all communications to let him twist in the wind, because we received at least 20 calls to the exchange and multiple emails. Marcus hung around the hotel for a day or two and then finally decided to leave for home. I assume at some point he may have contacted the car company, but I never confirmed it. When he finally got home, he found his office had been packed up and left with his wife. An HR person met him off-site to give him his severance and retrieve the company laptop and other property. I heard his wife left him sometime later and his mistress was fired for fraud. I figure he spent at least $15,000 on travel and hotel. Epilogue. I wish I could say I tipped my hand and told Marcus that I was the author of his demise, but it really served no purpose and in theory may have exposed me to some retribution of my own. By my moral compass, I got even with a thief who was content to steal and take my livelihood. That was plenty. Sicilian Alzheimer's. Never forget an offense. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd have to deal with an entitled nightmare like this at my own vacation property. I'm a police officer in a medium-sized city, and after years of saving, I finally bought a small lakeside cottage about an hour outside of town. It's nothing fancy, just a cozy little place where I can relax on my days off and escape the stress of the job. One sunny Saturday morning, I drove up to spend the weekend at the cottage. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar SUV parked right in front of my place. Weird, I thought. Maybe someone got lost and needed directions. I got out of my car and walked toward the porch. That's when I saw her, a middle-aged woman with the classic Karen haircut standing on my porch, peering in the windows. "Excuse me," I called out. "Can I help you with something?" She spun around, startled. "Oh, there you are. Are you the caretaker?" I blinked in confusion. "Caretaker? No, this is my property. I'm the owner." Karen's face scrunched up like she'd smelled something bad. "Owner? That can't be right. This cottage is supposed to be available for my family's vacation this week. I booked it online." Now I was really confused. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. I've never listed this place for rent. It's my private property." "Well, someone obviously made an error," Karen huffed. "I paid good money to stay here, so you need to let us in right now. My family is waiting in the car." I tried to stay calm and explain again. "Ma'am, I understand you're frustrated, but this is my personal vacation home. I don't rent it out. You must have booked a different property." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. Listen here, you little liar. I know for a fact that I reserved this exact cottage. I recognize it from the photos. Now stop playing games and give me the keys. I'm not lying, I said firmly, and I'm not giving you keys to my private property. Please leave now before this becomes a problem. Oh, it's already a problem, she shrieked. I demand to speak to your manager. I'll have your job for this. I had to hold back a laugh. Ma'am, I don't have a manager. I'm the owner, like I said. Now please get off my property before I have to call the authorities. Karen stepped toward me, jabbing her finger in my face. Don't you dare threaten me. I know my rights. This is false advertising, and I'll sue you for everything you've got. I took a deep breath, trying to stay professional. Ma'am, for the last time, you need to leave. You're trespassing on private property. I'm not going anywhere until you let me in my rental, she screeched, and then, before I could react, she slapped me hard across the face. I stood there in shock for a moment, my cheeks stinging. Then my training kicked in. In one smooth motion, I grabbed her wrist and spun her around, pinning her arm behind her back. You're under arrest for assault, I said calmly, reaching for my handcuffs. Karen started shrieking and flailing. Help! Police! This man is attacking me! I am the police, I informed her as I cuffed her. And you just assaulted an officer. That's a felony. All the color drained from Karen's face as the reality of the situation sank in. What? You can't arrest me? I'm the victim here. I recited her Miranda rights as I walked her to my car. A man and 2 kids had gotten out of the SUV and were watching with horrified expressions. Is this your family? I asked Karen. She nodded meekly. I turned to the man. Sir, I'm Officer Johnson with the city police. I'm afraid I have to take your wife in for assaulting an officer. You're welcome to follow us to the station. The poor guy looked shell-shocked. I don't understand. We rented a cottage for our vacation. What's going on? I explained the situation as gently as I could. I'm sorry, but it seems you've been the victims of a scam. This is my private property. I've never rented it out. Someone must have stolen photos of my place and created a fake listing. The man's face fell. Oh no. We paid over $1,000 for this rental. Our whole vacation is ruined. I felt bad for the family, even if the wife was awful. Listen, why don't you come down to the station with me? We can file a report about the scam and try to track down whoever took your money. I know some folks who rent out legit vacation properties around here. Maybe we can find you another place to stay. The guy nodded gratefully. Thank you, officer. I'm so sorry about my wife's behavior. This is completely unacceptable. We all headed to the police station, where Karen was booked on assault charges. Her husband was actually a decent guy who was horrified by her actions. He cooperated fully in filing a report about the rental scam. In the end, Karen ended up with a criminal record and community service. The family got most of their money back after we tracked down the scammer. I even helped them find a nice rental cabin for a discounted rate, so their vacation wasn't totally ruined. As for me, I invested in some security cameras for the cottage. You never know when another entitled Karen might show up thinking she owns the place. But at least now I have a crazy story to tell at the next department barbecue. The next one is a petty revenge story. I was very ill during 8th grade, in the US, so that's the last year of grade school before high school, and missed a few months completely, and was only allowed to do half days for another month or so. Even though I was doing homework, I wasn't getting the in-person instruction, and I'm more of a visual auditory learner. So needless to say, my grades weren't great, and therefore placement in high school was at a remedial level my freshman year. But they had figured out what was wrong with me, and the medication had worked, so I had no attendance issues and had nearly a 4.0 GPA. I was the only person from my grade school to go to this high school. The city line was literally our back fence. So I had to make friends with people who had gone to the same grade school their entire lives. I finally made a few friends. Most of them were in the marching band, even though I wasn't. Unbeknownst to me, this was also when this feud started. Another member of the band, who was friends with some of my little circle, was very invested in being in the top 10 of the class. And suddenly she was at 11 because I was in the top 10. I don't know why she had no issues with the other 9. I obviously knew I was in the top 10, actually was salutatorian at the end, but ranked I think 4th because 3 people were valedictorians with perfect 4.0 GPAs, but had no idea this was bothering anyone except me. To get to the schools I wanted to apply to, I needed to be in the good classes, especially math. I have always and will always hate math, but sophomore year I had to take algebra and geometry to get caught up. I guarantee that year took several years off my life, and I'm amazed I didn't get gray hair, but I succeeded. It wasn't until junior year, when we were starting ACT prep classes, that one of my friends made an offhand comment to the effect of, "If you do well on the ACTs, then Crystal will have to stop saying you cheated your way to the top." What now? Literally the entire group I was sitting with, about 9 people, are just staring at me until someone finally said, "You know Crystal has been saying you took those easy classes freshman year to boost your GPA, right?" No, in fact I did not. Everyone looked very uncomfortable. I was still trying to make sense of that when someone helpfully chimed in, "Yeah, she's been talking all summer about how when she gets a better ACT score than you, it will prove you shouldn't be in the top 10. Okay, so does she think she gets to take my spot if she gets a higher score? To this day, I have no clue why this was so important to her. But eventually the day came where we got our scores back, and she was telling the whole school about her 31, which is a very good score. She was extremely intelligent, which is why I was so baffled that this mattered to her. And I just said, nothing. Because I knew she would ask me in front of everyone, and while I thought the whole thing was ridiculous, I had a bit of a petty streak. So during lunch, she stood up at the end of our lunch table and basically yelled, "Clara, did you hear I got a 31? "Sure did. Congratulations." She just stood there a minute while I drank my soda. Then finally, "Well, I haven't heard from anyone what you got. Don't you want to share?" "I don't mind. I got a 32. It was like watching a balloon deflate. It was certainly not my proudest moment, but at the same time, if you're going to be in intense competition for something, you should maybe at least let your opponent know about it. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I've been at my new job long enough I can share this now without feeling like there'd be blowback. I'm a web designer. Every place I've been, I get put in charge of the fleet of websites whatever company or group is running, and then I go through and do my thing, making the sites are tight, efficient, and user-friendly as I can. Web design is like any task. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And for websites, that means the designer in charge has to be the arbiter of clutter. If things get to be too much on a page or requests come in that would degrade the UI of the site, we had to reject them. We want sites to be fast, light, and easy to use. Being the person in charge of the sites, I was generally the one to reject requests. We shouldn't do this because X, Y, and Z reasons. I was told by my bosses that I couldn't say no, and that I had to be customer focuses even when the requests to update the site were coming from those without technical knowledge or the desire to understand what I was saying, and the reason why I wouldn't do something. This could also go over on our boomers being fools because most of the people that hated me, someone younger than them, telling them no, were also of that generational set. Regardless, after a number of times of them getting a no because, from me, them going over my head to my boss and then my boss saying, "Just do it," I had to come up with a solution. If they were going to go around my informal process based on my knowledge and experience, I would formalize it. At the organization I was working at, we had standards, which were signed off by the higher-ups and had the word of law and guidance, which did get some sign-offs but didn't go through the length formalization process. Standards you had to follow, but everyone thought guidance worked the same way. That was the loophole. I wrote a 60-page web update guide going over everything in the process, ensuring that any question I'd be asked, anything that needed to get done, any stupid question that had come my way over the previous 2 years was answered. I then got my boss to sign off on it, and then sent it around, and also posted it on the internal use portal too. From that point forward, the guide was what we followed. Best part, and this is the malicious part, for those wondering, I never had to get any changes to the document approved. It was designed as a living document, and I was the sole person in charge of it. Requester: "Hey, I want to do this on the page." Me goes and edits the web update guide to specifically disallow what they were requesting. "Oh, I'm sorry, as per the web update guide we can't do this." Worked like a charm and made my job easier from that day forward. The next one is an entitled people's story. I, 31F, was contacted by someone, 44F, who wanted to rent the spare room in my home for a few weeks, and I was elated since I've been broke for a while. Toast and curry diet. The person explained that they wanted to move in the day after tomorrow, and while it was short notice, I agreed as it was possible to clean up the house and room in a day with some hard work. But later that night, she asked to arrive tomorrow. I warned her that I would be cleaning then, and she said it's okay, but will confirm later whether she actually needs to come tomorrow. Next day rolls by, and I'm cleaning like a maniac. In this country, we don't have central air, so it's rather expensive to cool, and the upper wall mount is in the living room bedrooms only, so I'm just cleaning in the heat. Haven't heard from the lady throughout most of the day. I send a message around 2 p.m. and she messages back that she's finding out within the next hour. Okay, I resume cleaning. 2 hours later, and she's at my front door with no notice. I welcome her inside, apologize for the mess since I'm not finished, and she wants to see the bedroom. We go upstairs, and the bed is disheveled as the sheets are drying. She mutters, "Different from the photos." Well, of course it's not looking like a hotel during the process of cleansing. We go back downstairs, and I turn on the AC for her and fetch her some water for her little pooch. She says she can't handle the smell of cats, although it says in the listing that there is a cat, and I reply that if the litter box is bothering her, I actually have the new litter here and changing it was one of the next steps. It was expected for her to just visit, drop off her things, then go out and enjoy the historic city and go to a restaurant since she said she's from a different city and visiting. So I was preparing for her to come back to a sparkly clean house. No, she says it's not possible for her to adapt. The woman then leaves, and as I lean out the front door to tell her goodbye and be careful in the heat, she waves for me to leave, saying not to watch her leave on her electric bicycle. Which is odd, because a visitor normally wouldn't have a personal electric assist, and when I asked her earlier how the city was treating her, the woman didn't really reply and seemed confused. I think I dodged a bullet, but was really happy for a time that someone was coming. At least I finally got some deep scrubbing and wood staining done. Heat exhaustion got to me though, so I spent the next few hours relaxing under the AC. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.